Hello, John. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good, thank you. Thanks for asking. John, before we move on, do you have a favorite quote, something that motivates you, inspires you, you would like to share with our audience?
One quote that I often think of is a quote from our General Dwight Eisenhower, who was also uh, our president in the 1950s. Uh, his quote was, "Leadership is the art of getting others to do what you want them to do because they want to do it." And that, to me, is kind of at the heart of everything that I have written about and talked about over the last 30 years. It's the they wanting to do it part of it that's the key.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, isn't it? That gives me a deep thought, what they want to do it. Cool, cool, cool. And John, we are on our pod. We talk about challenges and how we navigate through the founder's journey. Based on that, imagine we are in a room of full of ambitious founders, early stage builders. Um,
Is there any
you,
other kind?
yeah, definitely there are some scale ups and some people who are just there for free pizza. Um, and you enter the room, you have the mic, no one knows you, and you've got just few minutes to introduce yourself. But most importantly, you're going to tell them in the first minute what are they going to learn if they stick with us for the rest hour. What would you say them? What would be your story to initiate this part?
What I would say is that it's clearly an important thing that they ought to be focusing on is achieving high levels of employee engagement. Early on in their journey, it's an ideal time to do it. Uh, and that there are a couple of pitfalls they need to avoid in achieving that, one of which is misunderstanding what employee engagement is. The other is missing some way stations toward achieving employee engagement. And the final piece, the third piece, might be that uh, missing what I think is the key leverage point for achieving higher levels of employee engagement. So those are kind of the three things that I think I would hope they would if I were skillful enough to hold their attention, that's what I hope they would take away from any remarks I might make.
Hmm. Okay, that's cool. So we will be focusing more around employee engagement. Would potentially be touching any points how we'll be building the teams. For example, if there is a scale up who wants to build the team, what are the strategies around that? Or we will be just focusing on the engagement side to, increase the productivity overall as a
Well,
organization.
they're related. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if you do engagement right, teams are going to be more effective.
Hmm.
So I think engagement is a lever toward achieving more effective teamwork and team building. So I think they're not unrelated topics.
Got it. Got it. Cool. So let's start then. So John, um, should one question comes to my mind straight away is um, founders have a very chaotic life. They have to not just focus on bringing business in, traction, bringing investment in, but also improve their product continuously with feedback, grasping from their current customers. Um, Employee engagement sort of like look to me, it seems like an element of the founder's journey, which is kept on the table at a point where they can look at it time to time. But they don't have much time left in their day-to-day activity to actually grasp it and then potentially open the Pandora box and then look into it. Do you think should founders be responsible for employee engagement, or is it ultimately down to employees to motivate themselves?
Yes, both. I
Hmm.
mean, employees do have responsibility, but no, I do think, and again, it's in the in the founder's interest to foster higher levels of engagement because it will lead to more effective teams. It will lead to higher levels of productivity and profitability and employee retention rates and all the kinds of things that tend to be the bugbears of a founder's existence, done right. It should be viewed as a lever that the founder has at his or her disposal to achieve the hard business. By the way, let me emphasize this. I know engagement kind of can be viewed as, oh, it's that soft stuff. The only reason I want to talk about this is because it leads to hard business results. The point of this is not to make nice with people. The point of this is to lead to better business results. That's why it matters. And that's why it ought to be paid attention to. So
Interesting. Okay, so is high engagement always a good thing in your opinion? Because I found that when you're a startup, when you're starting something new, uh, a lot of founders tend to be doing a lot of micromanagement. And when you do micromanagement, you kind of deter the employees to do things which you want to, and then they kind of, you know, they lose the focus, and then they try to go away to either competitors or other organizations. Um, do you think, or maybe I can put this question in a different way: is high engagement always a good thing, or can overly engaged employees blur boundaries and risk burnouts?
high engagement is always a good thing if the notion of engagement is properly understood. So let me get into that. I think one of the places where organizations go wrong in this world of employee engagement is they tend to see it as a mechanical thing, that engagement is people being more involved, people getting together, people connecting. Engagement can connote gears engaging. The reason people got all excited about or interested in employee engagement kind of goes back roughly to the turn of the century, when a number of studies came out, largely influenced by Gallup and the Conference Board and a few others, that show the correlation between higher levels of engagement and better results along those important criteria that I mentioned: productivity, profitability, employee retention rates. But the definition of engagement that was behind those studies was not just bringing people together or people being involved. It was, the definition of engagement there was the extent to which people bring incremental effort and energy to the task at hand. So it's not just people throwing people in a room and saying, get together and work on this, or the founder having more face time with people and quote, engaging with them in that way. It's creating the environment in which people will be more inclined to invest that incremental effort and energy. Those are different things. And that I see in my work, I see that as the biggest pitfall. The place where people go wrong most often is they equate engagement with getting together. They equate engagement with kind of physically, mechanically connecting. Can I give you an example?
Yeah, sure. Go on.
I was doing some work with a vice president of HR for a rather large organization, and we weren't even talking about engagement. We were talking about something else.
Hmm.
While I was in her office, though, she handed me a sheet of paper, and it turned out it was the agenda for an offsite 2-day meeting she was going to have the following week with her leadership team. She said, "What do you think of this agenda?" And I looked at it. I said, "This seems fine to me. It makes sense." But I noticed that she had handwritten in on day 2 for, I think, like 1 to 3 p.m. breakout sessions. I said, "Okay, what are you going to do during breakout sessions?" "We don't know yet." "Well, what's your objective for doing them?" "We don't know." I said, "Why are you doing them?" She said, "Well, that's the engagement part of the meeting." So that to me kind of bells the cat. That says, in her mind, they were having this 2-day meeting And there was this 2-day section was going to be about engagement. When properly understood, she should have been thinking about the whole meeting in terms of how can I make this meeting engaging to my employees? How can I craft this meeting in a way that net at the end, they will be more inclined to invest incremental effort and energy on the job? And it might not have meant any breakout sessions. It might have meant, how can I bring in speakers who will really give them intriguing things to think about? How can I give them challenges that will really test their mettle? But she just saw it as, oh yeah, engagement. I need to get them in a room. And when you put people in a room like that, it could actually be disengaging, because they might be in the room saying, they might be trying real hard, but they might also be saying, didn't we just do this 2 months ago? And nobody listened to us anyway. And why did I bother? Why did I click on accept when this meeting invite? You understand what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
The problem is a misunderstanding of what engagement is in the first place. And so to the question you asked is, can there be too much engagement? Properly understood, I don't think there can be too much engagement unless you think there could be too much incremental effort and energy invested by your people, because that's what engagement is. If you see engagement as too much in your face from the bosses and everybody getting together, yeah, there could be too much of that. That's just superficial stuff
Mm.
that may or may not be engaging, but could also be disengaging. That making sense?
It does, it does. And thanks for sharing the example. So what would, based on this example and your learning, and you've been helping a lot of employers, especially in the founder space, about getting their employees engaged. What are the prerequisites? So, for example, if somebody just got investment, right, for their company, there are 2 or 3 people, co-founders, they have got into their first VC round, they got it. They're building the team now. They're recruiting the people to build the team. Let's say they have to recruit 50 people to build. What are the prerequisites to make sure that employee engagement always be at the peak of it? And what kind of strategies the founders should adopt in not just recruiting, but also creating an environment in-house so that the engagement of the employees who are coming on board, like early stage employees, remain consistently high, and then ultimately helps the company to grow faster?
Well, I would say be as open and transparent as you can be. I understand there are limitations to that, particularly in that world, but as you can be. Uh, yeah, it's a cliche, but hire slowly and fire quickly. I mean, take time when you're hiring people, because these are the people you're going to be bringing along, and make sure they are inclined, that they are the ones who you're going to want to bring along with you on this journey. I would I would build in as many opportunities as possible to share as much information as possible. I would be as open as possible with why you're doing what you're doing. And I don't mean the finances. I mean, in particular, I found one of the most effective ways of getting people enthused about what they do is bringing them as close to the customer as possible. I don't mean necessarily bringing them face to face with the customer, but making sure people understand, to use the jargon, really truly what your value proposition is to your customer. What is it that you're bringing to the market that nobody else is bringing? And how can they contribute to that goal? And maybe even ask them, think about, what is it that you can do that can add to our value proposition that maybe in a small organization of dozens of people, it becomes possible to say, what can you bring that nobody else here can bring? You were hired
Mm.
for a reason, but you may have some life experience. You may have some former professional experience. What are some things that you may be able to bring that we aren't even aware that you have, that you can bring to even add to our value proposition? That I have found to be the single most powerful way to get people jazzed about their work. But again, I will go back and qualify always by saying as open as possible. I recognize there are limitations. I'm not saying that we're not doing this to be, this is not a club, this is a business. And so it needs to be done in a business-like way, and not, the goal is not to make people happy with you. The goal is to make the business successful. And one way to make the business successful is to have people eager to come to work in the morning. In other words, engaged.
Hmm. Interesting. So by clarifying it, they get to know what value they will be delivering early as possible, as you mentioned, right? And then systematically understanding the value they are proposing to deliver with the organization, it helps them to understand their role in the organization. And then based on their understanding of their role, it helps them to add value, which is kind of very straightforward path.
Yeah, and also then within that context, make sure that, I mean, I mentioned that engagement properly understood is the essential first step, but there are
Mm,
other steps along the way, and the heuristic in my new book. I have a new book out that's title is If Engagement is the What, Then Respect is the How. And I offer a heuristic which says that respect begets trust, trust begets empowerment, empowerment begets engagement. So there are these three steps that come before engagement: respect, trust, and empowerment. And if you don't attend to those, you're not going to get to engagement. Engagement is just going to be this goal over the horizon. So we'll take the one that's closest to engagement, and that's empowerment. You have to have an empowering organization. Look, I'm an engineer by background, so I get a little uncomfortable using these soft terms myself, but it's the word that's used, so I'll use it. The definition of empowerment that I offer is empowerment is a feeling of safety while exercising judgment on the job. Simply put, you are in a position where now you have to exercise judgment. You have to make a decision. Sometimes things go south. So if I'm on the job and I make a decision and I know things might go south, what will the reaction be? Will my boss say to me, well, that didn't quite work out the way we had hoped. Let's talk a little bit about the way you went about making your decision. What did you consider? What might you have overlooked? How might you approach it differently next time so that this doesn't happen next time? And let's learn from that and go forward. That, a feeling of safety can be preserved. That's a good, empowering approach. If, on the other hand, the boss rips your face off, that's not empowering. So that's another thing to attend to. That's an extreme example, but we've all seen it, and to some extent, we've probably all done it. I hope I've never ripped anybody's face off, but I'm sure I've been less than patient with people at times and done a little damage. Um, I can give you another example, if I might. There was a different client, very large corporation, multi-billion-dollar company. They were being given the results of a survey that they had done about the degree to which employees felt empowered. And the results were very disappointing. So when the results had been presented, the president of the company got up, and he was a very good guy, very smart guy, well-intentioned guy. He wasn't a rip your face off kind of guy. But he got up and he said, oh, in attendance at the meeting were his direct reports and their direct reports. So in a multi-billion-dollar company, this is a high-level meeting. This is an expensive meeting. And he said to these people, said, look, you all need to understand that you are all empowered. I now need you to go back and tell your people, make sure your people understand that they are all empowered. And I was sitting in the back of the room, and I could see one of his vice presidents, who was sitting in the front of the room, started to raise his hand, and then he pulled it back down. And then after that session, there was a break. So I made a beeline toward the guy who started to put his hand up. And I said, you wanted to say something. when he said that you ought to go back and tell people they're empowered. He said, yeah, I did. I said, what did you want to say? He said, well, what I wanted to say was, we can tell people they're empowered till we're blue in the face, but if they don't feel empowered, they're not empowered. I said, well, why didn't you say it? He said, oh, no, too risky. I couldn't risk it. Now think of the irony of that. If empowerment
Why
is a
is
feeling,
risky?
if empowerment is a feeling of safety on the job, he felt at risk about saying to his boss that our approach to empowerment is wrong. And this was in a pretty safe, he probably could have said it and his boss would have laughed. But, you know, uh, so that's another place where founders, they have the advantage of having small organizations. So they don't need to call these big meetings with 200 people with thousands more spread out across the world. You know, you can get everybody in a room. Don't do it too often. You got a small business to run. But, you know, you can have these heart to hearts and you can have people say, hey, you know, that didn't feel good that I wasn't able to raise my hand. And he said, oh, yeah, I get it. Okay, I hear you. And that's a really important one. That do people feel safe to speak up? That is an important way station along the road to engagement. So if you don't get past that, you're not going to get to engagement. So that's an important one too.
Yeah, yeah, and I totally agree with you on this one because it's in the policy document it says something else, and in actuality it is different for in a real world, right?
People
Would
know
you
what
be
the
able?
real world is. People know.
Yeah, yeah. People get to know once they face the devil, the big devil sitting in there.
They
I
know how
don't
the
want to
world
call
works.
it devil, is it?
They know how the
Yeah,
world
it's
works. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So John, tell me more about. Do you have an example where you can? I want to know two things from you. One is where if you have an example where the employee engagement wasn't good in the organization, and because of that, the whole company just collapsed, and or anything closer to that. And then another one where the employee engagement was very high, and then the company thrived, like from zero to, I don't know, tens of millions. Is there something to contrast stories or experiences you had in past which you could share with our audience?
Well, I've seen many examples where engagement levels were low and businesses just tried and tried and tried and couldn't understand why they couldn't turn it around. And they just kept slogging and slogging and slogging. And I think the reason they weren't able to turn things around were some of the examples I was giving, that they hadn't really come to grips with what engagement really was and what it called for on the part of the leaders of the organization. Look, people are less comfortable dealing with the soft stuff than they are with the hard numbers. That's just human nature. And the fact is, this soft stuff matters. And I hope I was clear at the beginning. I'm not saying that you should block off, 4 hours a day on this stuff. It's just, if you understand where the leverage points are, you can be much more effective with it. So I don't have any examples where I saw an organization completely collapse. I have a number of examples where I just saw a lot of organizations just treading water as they saw competitors pass them, and they never quite understood why. And to some extent that was a failure on my part. I wasn't able to get through to them. If they hired me to help them understand and I was unable to help them understand, I failed. um, I can give you one really good example on the other side, though, where a company was in a very competitive situation. It's not in the kind of it's in a duller business than you're typically used to dealing with as an insurance company, but they were finding themselves in a difficult situation. And we employed some of these methods and they turned things around dramatically. And the single most powerful tactical thing we did with that. Well, first, we got their entire leadership team to be willing to try this approach. And the president of the company said to me, I'm not sure I buy it, but I'll try it. And I said, Tom, as long as you'll try it. And, we shook hands. We looked each other in the eye and shook hands, and I believed him, and he did try it. And the single most powerful tactic we did was we had the CEO and chairman, same guy, chairman and CEO, went around to the entire company, and he led a half-day seminar. I helped him with it, but he and I went around to every employee in the company, and there were, I don't know, 1,000 employees. So 40 people per seminar. So it's that 25 seminars, that the arithmetic right? I think it is. And about making the customer come alive for them. That whole notion of helping them understand how their role affected the value to the customer. And at the end of that, they thought, man, if the chairman and CEO has taken the time to do this, this really means something. And then we did give them homework to do where we created what we called their customer value book, where we thought the 7 or 8, what we call their customer value statements, which kind of captured the essence of what they could deliver. And they went to work on doing some basic reengineering of some business processes. And the biggest business process change they made was we recommended that they had operated their claim centers from regional centers. We recommended it made more sense to have one national claim center in central Massachusetts. And that way the regional centers could focus on the harder cases instead of having their time taken up with routine stuff. The national center could deal with routine stuff. The regional people could deal with harder cases. And that worked out great. The postscript to the story was, and this is the real important part, about a year and a half after they moved the center to the national claim center, it burned down. And the president, I heard it happen. I called the president. This is the guy who had been a skeptic. And he said to me, John, I heard that the thing had burned down, and I thought, oh, good Lord, what are we going to do? And he said, 10 minutes later, I looked in my doorway, and there were people in my doorway from HR, from accounting, from finance, from building maintenance, all non-customer contact functions, but who had internalized what was important to the business, and they understood that the claims process was the key thing for the business. And they said, we heard what happened. How can we help? And he said, by the end of the day, they had a temporary claim center set up in their training room. He said, we were only down for like 3 hours. He said, it never would have happened had we not taken the time to go out and do the training and change people's mindsets. And he said, these people were deeply engaged in the business in a way they never had been before. And they went on, that crisis was averted, and their business results took off for the next several years. So that is the most stark example I could give of that. And even with the dramatic, I mean, I couldn't have made it up. You think it was a bad movie if I said the thing burned down, but it actually happened. And no, I didn't burn it down just to make a point.
That's yeah.
These people showed up in his doorway.
Yeah,
People
that's thought-provoking.
who never had thought of their job as affecting the customer, and they showed up and said, "How can we help?"
How can we help? Yeah, it's amazing, and yeah, I couldn't anticipate, like, if I've been in that situation and if I didn't had this option, what would I be done? What would you have done?
If what? If they hadn't said, "How can we help?"
Yeah, I mean, like if there's nobody came, it, you know.
Well, they probably would have put together quickly put together. I mean, they did put together a task force, and they probably would have come up with some sort of, hey, we need to set up some kind of temporary center. Smart people would have come up with something like that. But the fact that on the ground, the people in the headquarters building just did it, and even I mean, they had family came in and brought soup and sandwiches. The people who are setting up the bed, they might not even have been involved in. They weren't technical people, so they couldn't set up the phone banks, but they were giving people sandwiches, and because they were a part of it, they felt a part of it in a way they hadn't
Mm,
before. You know.
yeah, yeah. In your book, then, John, did you mention about different technique or strategies to improve employee engagement? And if you have, then is there a possibility you can share it with our audience?
Well, again, I do think the whole book is about. Um, I'm a big believer in being clear and consistent in the use of language.
Mm-hmm.
And so essentially the whole book is about saying, these four things: respect, trust, empowerment, engagement are tricky things. They're tricky enough to begin with, but if you're not clear and consistent, you're never going to get there. So I
Mm,
offer straightforward definitions of each of them and talk about why it's so important to be clear and consistent with the use of each of them. So I've given you the definition of engagement. And I give you the definition of empowerment, a feeling of safety while exercising judgment on the job. Respect is the next one. Um, it's giving due consideration to the other. I'm sorry. Let me. The next one is trust. Trust is a feeling of confident expectation. Can you do people have you set expectations accurately? And that's both parties in any transaction own that. If I had a boss he used to use the expression, you say, you got to put a pin in it, meaning don't say to me, I'll have it to you by the end of the week. He would say, what, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? Which? Oh, Thursday. And he'd say, morning, afternoon, morning. He'd say 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. And he was doing it to make a point, but be as clear as you can be about expectations and make sure both sides or all parties agreed this is what we've agreed on. These are the expectations. Now, it's possible sometimes stuff comes up and expectations can't be met. So what happens? The instant you know that you're not going to be able to meet the expectation, what do? You alert the other party and you reset them.
mm,
If you develop a reputation for never meeting the expectation, well, that's a whole other thing. But we all know that this stuff happens. It's just it's being clear and vigilant about setting expectations about what you're going to get, when you're going to get it, and what will happen if the expectations aren't met, which kind of goes to the feeling of safe. That's why it's related to empowerment. The feeling of safety is my expectation that you're going to put your arm around me and say, why did this go south? Or you're going to rip my face off. Those are not unrelated things.
mm,
So all these things do go together. And I said earlier, I'm an engineer by training and by disposition,
mm.
but I I think it does come down to these. The problem statement does come down to being clear about these items. And the
Indeed.
final one, respect begets. I'm sorry. Respect begets trust. Trust begets empowerment. Empowerment begets engagement. To me, the single most powerful thing in all of this is the notion of respect.
Mm,
And my definition of respect that I hammer away at in my book is giving due consideration to the other.
mm.
Did you stop to think about what you said or didn't say, what you did or didn't do, how it affected others? If he didn't stop to think about that, that's disrespectful. That's all.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you need to, you know, throw rose petals in people's paths. And I've said it 3 or 4 times. This isn't about being a nice guy and, there's a business to run, but did you stop to consider, due consideration? Did you stop to consider it? Did you stop to think about how this is affecting other people? I mean, I have an example in my book where an employee had the boss had made a request, send me the information about thus and such. So the employee sent off an email with the information attached, and he gets an email in reply, all in caps, all in boldface, all italicized with 4 exclamation points. Not what I was looking for. That's all it said. That's all it said.
Mm.
So now, if the employee knew the boss pretty well and they'd had a good work, he might have been able to walk down to the boss's office and say, having a bad day? Can you give me a little more to go on than this? But suppose he didn't. He might have said, I don't know where to begin here. He might have clear his calendar for the rest of the day, cancel a bunch of his meetings for the rest of the day, which would be disrespectful to the people he was meeting with, which might have been disrespectful to the people they were meeting with. There's a ripple effect, all
Mm.
because the boss hadn't taken the time to say, hey, here's what's missing. Because in the story I say, it emerges that all he had to say was, I thought we were going to include thus and such in the plan. All he had to do is add that sentence. And the employee said, oh, yeah, all right, I got that. That would have been an easy fix. But
Mm.
and I'm not trying to sound holier than thou. I've made all these mistakes in my career when I was managing people. It's hard. I make a point in the book that it's possible for something to be simultaneously simple and difficult. It's simple to remember these definitions. It's difficult to abide by them all the time because
Yeah.
we got all kinds of things pushing on us, pulling on us, but they're simple. So if you just have them in front of you and you think, just, and I'd say to people, if there's one thing you can do to drive engagement in your organization, focus on infusing as much respect throughout the organization as you can. And the best way to do it is for you to show it to the people around you, because people will watch what you as the leader, you as the founder are doing, and they will say, that's the way it's done around here. They'll also
Indeed.
notice its absence and do that.
Indeed. Thank you very much, John, for sharing that. Great stuff. So we got our quickfire round at the end of our pod. We got 6 quickfire questions. At any stage, if you feel like you don't want to answer any of them, just give me a skip, and then I'll move to the next one. But I'm
Okay.
sure you'll be happy to answer all of them. Yeah. We'll just take one question at a time. Are you ready?
Okay.
Great. What book would you recommend to our audience and why?
Well, the easy answer is my new book, but that's
Do you have it on the table? Can you show it?
trying to do it so you not getting too much glare. There you go. You seeing it?
If engagement is the what, then respect is the how.
Yeah.
John.
It's available on
Guaspari.
Amazon. What book? Boy, this is going back a long time, but the book that probably influenced me, the most was the book by Tom Peters way back when. Now I'm forgetting the title of it. Man, that's how long ago it was. In Search of Excellence.
Mm.
It was written 30 some years ago, but I think the lessons still hold, because a lot of the lessons in that are about what we've been talking about, making the customer come alive. In Search of Excellence by Tom Peters, and he had a co-author whose name escapes me, but that's one. And actually, it might be good to dig out a book from the past that people might have forgotten about.
Great stuff. What What's one attribute or characteristic in your mind of a successful founder?
Integrity.
Hmm. Integrity is so needed nowadays
I mean,
in the space that
without it,
it's
you've got nothing. And integrity, I'm using integrity in the moral ethical sense, but also kind of in the mechanical sense. Integrity is like in the integrity of a building. You know, if a building doesn't have integrity, it will collapse. Is it solid? Is it solid? Is its foundation solid? Integrity.
yeah, definitely. And you might have already touched on this question before, but because we already had it in our questionnaire, what are the top three strategies to engage employees more that founders have to, implement in order to get better engagement in 2025?
Be clear on the definition of engagement. Be clear on that heuristic I mentioned. Respect begets trust, trust begets empowerment, empowerment begets engagement, and work to infuse respect throughout the organization. By the way, the one thing I neglected to mention about respect, part of what makes it so powerful is that of all those things, it's the one thing that everybody has complete control over. You don't need a budget, you don't need permission, you just do it. You know,
Mm,
to give due consideration to another is just something you decide to do. You don't need to have funding to do that.
mm,
And so there's another way to say that is there's no excuse not to.
not to. No, got it. Yeah. What's your favorite personal productivity tool or habit?
Oh, it's something I've been doing ever since the beginning of my career back during I think the Lincoln administration. I once a week. So today is Thursday. So every Friday, I make out my plan for the following week and follow it. And I update it. Now, obviously, it changes, but it's the cliche is plan the work, then work the plan. So I will make my plan for the following week, and then I look at Monday and say, what do I have on the plan for Monday? And I'll do that. Now, again, it might have changed, but it, I, I'm not, my wife might have disagreed with this. I don't, I don't have any huge need to be in control, but I have a need for things to be under control. I feel much more relaxed if things are under control, even if they're under somebody else's control. So if once I have my plan for the following week done, I say, good, I kind of sort of know what next week looks like. So I've been doing that for 50 years, and it's done well by me. I don't know if it's useful to anybody else, but
No, definitely. I do have a calendar on my fridge also where we plan the whole month. Well, at least for the big things happening. And then, every day I have this AI planner on my phone. I talk to it and then it schedules it for me for the rest of the
yeah. And I've
week.
told
So
my
that's
kids are 42 and 38, and I told them about that, and in one form or another, they do it now, and they've done okay by themselves.
yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree. Great. And what's a new or a crazy business idea you would love to pursue if you had time?
Oh, it's not so much a business idea as it is just a personal itch. I've been a writer. This is my eighth book, but all my books have been business books. I've written dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of articles, from business articles to book reviews and movie reviews, and even for a couple of years wrote a humor column. I would like to write a novel, but whether that will ever happen or not, I don't know. But that's kind of always been there. That's always on my weekly list and the nice to do section of my weekly list, so it doesn't fall off completely.
Awesome. Great stuff. And last but not least, what's an interesting or fun fact about you that most people don't know?
An interesting or fun fact about me, huh? Well, again, I even though I do this kind of work now, I started out as an aerospace engineer, and I quit. And I quit because I tried it and didn't like it. And I was 26 years old and said, I wasn't married. I said, I'd better quit now because I don't want to wake up in 5 years and be married and have two kids and discover that I can't quit. So I quit, and I tried to make a living as a freelance writer and wasn't quite able to do that, but headed down a different path in corporate America as a writer, as a promotional writer. And as a matter of fact, met the woman who became my wife. And 5 years later, we did have two small kids, but I was in a career that I liked. So there we are.
There you go. There you go. Always works out if you follow your passion, right?
Yeah.
So that's good. John, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your story, unpacking all the secret strategies for building more trust, building more engagement in the organization. If people want to get in touch with you, people want to check out, or people want to have a conversation with you, what's the best way to do it?
They can go to my website. It's johnguaspari.com. I don't know if it'll be in the show notes, but it's my name's on the screen there. It's John Guaspari without the space between the N and the G.com. That's
Got
my
it. So
website.
straightforward. Awesome. John, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your inspiring journey and the impactful work you're doing. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on Founders Podcast.
Thank you, Ash. Appreciate the opportunity.